Hi, I'm Dr. Avanti Singh. In over 20 years of practicing both Western medicine and Eastern healing traditions, the most important thing that I've learned is that healing is a journey we take together. So on this podcast, I'll be demystifying Ayurveda and other integrated medicine, showing how these simple, ancient practices are the keys to unlocking a healthy modern life. We are all healing catalysts because healing starts within. It starts with you, and it starts right now. This is a Soulfire production. Episode number 54. Well, hello, my beautiful friends. And if you're new here, welcome to the Healing Catalyst podcast. I'm Avanti, and I'm so happy that you're here with me and that you're here with all of these beautiful human beings that are part of this community. You know, this community amazes me every day as it continues to grow every single week. And for that, I'm so grateful to all of you. Today, we're continuing our exploration of healing with integrative medicine with my guest and colleague, Dr. BIAN Schuff. Dr. Schuff is a naturopathic physician, nutritionist, and the director of naturopathy and nutrition at BIÂN Chicago, where I'm also the director of Ayurveda. And I have to tell you, when we met each other a year ago, we hit it off in about the first 5 minutes of meeting each other. BIAN's training and clinical experience within primary and integrative care settings has centered on using food as medicine, herbal therapy, endobiogeny, and the mind-body connection to bring balance to the human system. His philosophy is that good health is relative to each unique individual, and it's an important resource to live a meaningful and present life, a philosophy that I share deeply with him. In our conversation, we talk about what naturopathic medicine is and how it differs from allopathic medicine. We also talk about the 4 guiding pillars of naturopathy and what they mean for the individual patient receiving treatment. And we also dive into why BIAN believes the patient's story is where the real medicine lies. BIAN and I had so much fun during this episode, and honestly, we could have kept talking for a few hours, which is no different than when we're at work together. BIAN is a wealth of knowledge and has so many profound insights to share. I know that you'll learn so much from this episode. So I'm so happy to share my conversation with Dr. BIAN Schuff about healing with integrative medicine and naturopathic medicine. BIAN, it is so great to have you on my podcast. Thank you so much for joining me and taking the time to do this with me today.
Thank you, Avanti. This is my pleasure.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. We've worked together now for, 6, 7, maybe 9 months, something like that.
Yeah.
And we've had so many wonderful conversations. And, I find that so many people have questions about naturopathy and what is it in naturopathic medicine, that I thought you would be the perfect person to really talk about this and dive into it, because actually there's a lot of synergies between Ayurveda and naturopathic medicine that actually a lot of people will come to me thinking it's very much the same or there's confusion. So let's just jump in a little bit first about, what is naturopathic medicine, and a little bit about your story too, like however you want to weave it in, but we'll kind of just talk here.
Yeah. So, very simply, naturopathic medicine is a framework of healthcare that is is interested in the preventative and restorative aspects of meeting someone where they're at with a health challenge or whatever they're going through. In contrast to that, more of a conventional approach would be waiting for a disease to kind of happen and responding in a disease-based model. So conventional medicine does that very well. And kind of how I see naturopathic medicine fitting in is that healthcare exists along this spectrum, right? And very often, I should say, medicine is predicated on reacting to problems once they've already occurred, or responding to trauma, or going through a pandemic and coming up with solutions for that side of things. But what I saw as not as utilized or emphasized as much in the healthcare continuum, as you could call it, are these restorative and preventative aspects. So a naturopathic doctor, and what I was trained in, kind of bridges the gap there. And I can get a little bit into my story, but a naturopathic doctor. I went to school out in Portland, Oregon at the National University of Natural Medicine. And the curriculum involved in naturopathic medical school to be a naturopathic doctor is a 4-year program, the same way that you went to medical school and had the didactic career that you did. We learn all the same things. We have cadaver labs. We learn about anatomy, physiology, all the pharmacology, all the lab work. The variance and the difference in kind of our teaching structure and how we practice are the modalities that we utilize. So not only do we learn about the pharmaceuticals, the drugs, the lab tests, kind of understanding pathology and where people are at with their disease, but with that, there's a much greater emphasis on things like nutrition and herbal medicine, botanical medicine, medicinal mushrooms, lifestyle measures, kind of how people live their lives. And then a lot of it is a mental, emotional aspect. So how are we relating to ourselves? What are our belief structures that kind of dictate how we live our lives and, impede us in certain ways? And then we also learn about physical medicine. Some naturopathic programs also have acupuncture infused in there. Mine didn't, but that's also a modality that can be pulled from there. So what that kind of provides as a naturopathic doctor is someone in the healthcare field that operates like a primary care physician. So in the state of Oregon where I was trained, if I was still there, I'm in Illinois clearly, I would be recognized as a primary care physician, and I have all the prescribing and ordering rights that any primary care physician has in that state, with the added benefit of all these tools in the toolbox that can be implemented on a state-by-state basis. If you're not interested in primary care, it's kind of irrelevant. But I think the important point there is that a naturopathic doctor bridges the gap between an understanding of the Western and conventional side of medicine. And we've been through all of that. I worked at primary care clinics and did the whole gamut. But on the other side of it, we get to spend more time with people, understand people as a human being. What are their challenges? What do they want to work on? And then we can, whatever tool in our toolbox that we, first of all, resonate most strongly with is our biggest skill and we think is going to help this person, we implement it from there. I think often conventional side, as this audience probably knows from an integrative approach, that the conventional side of medicine can often, with a lot of problems that are difficult to deal with, run out of train track pretty quickly. The options are a referral or kind of a standard medication, steroid, antibiotic, that sort of thing, and a lot of kind of shoulder shrugging. And I think that is what naturopathic medicine can provide as a stopgap. Is there actually is a lot that we can look into and try to understand about somebody and get them to where they want to go.
Right. So what you're really saying is that I probably should have gone to naturopathic school instead of allopathic medical school. It's really sort of that bridge of really kind of what integrative medicine is trying to do,
right,
which is to bridge those two worlds of understanding the Western model and really training in that, the pathology, the physiology, the pharmacology, all of that stuff, but then bridging it with so many of these healing systems and traditions that we've known for so long, right?
Yeah.
And so you kind of got the best of all worlds, Ben. Yeah. I'm so jealous.
And the story behind that is that I was, the intention going into, high school and undergrad was I just wanted to help people. And I figured medicine was kind of what was most interesting to me. So all through that experience, I was in pre-med and I worked as an EMT in college. I worked in hospitals. I was a scribe in an emergency room. I volunteered at various clinics, and I did a lot of shadowing of doctors, shadowing of PAs, whatever I could get my hands in a bunch of different contexts. And kind of what I saw in that, because I only knew what I knew, which is what we all do. The more I was getting exposed to these different contexts of medicine and different experiences, different providers, what I was finding from the conventional side of things is that no one's doing anything wrong, but it's more of the system in play is very abbreviated and doesn't really get to the level of understanding and more not a humanistic enough approach for me that I guess I couldn't put the words to it that I just did then, but there was something that I was being disillusioned by and discouraged by that I could see where this train was heading if I went the conventional route. I didn't really know how to square that at the time. and my now wife at the time, obviously I was airing my grievances, and he came across naturopathic medicine. It was like, have you ever heard anything like this? And looking into it more, kind of all that I've just explained of kind of how the curriculum is laid out, what it offers, what kind of problem it's trying to solve, I was like, this sounds amazing, because I'm going to get to be that sort of person that understands what's going on from a conventional standpoint,
right?
But be able to know people. I think that's the biggest thing that I wanted out of helping people. I don't think anybody goes into medicine not caring or not wanting to help people.
For sure.
It's kind of the lens and the prism that they get pushed into, just kind of based on how insurance is set up, how hospital systems are about volume, not about quality, right? It's about how can we expedite this because I have 20 other people to see today. And
right.
that's part of healthcare, and that's an important part. And there's a triage, and some people only need a few minutes because, it's a splinter, right? But I think when an experience that I had that was kind of a final straw for me, as I was shadowing a cardiologist for a number of weeks. And, I saw a lot of this, but a man came in who was not doing well and had congestive heart failure. And it was one of those things where I was sitting with this guy, could see that there was a lot of problems that had not been addressed. It's very just much a medication management situation. And the doc comes into the room looking at his clipboard, barely looks up, and just says, we're going to tweak a few things, see you in 6 months. And my thought was, there's no guarantee that this guy is here in 6 months. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like, what happened to this physician to have lost, like when he envisioned himself at 23 years old, he never would have seen that kind of interaction happening. Right. And what's lost there is an understanding of who that person was and is and could be. And, there wasn't even a space held, regardless of that person's fate was probably inevitable, mm-hmm. but there was no sort of acknowledgement that we just need to get this person out as quick as possible. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of the difference between, the traditional Western allopathic model versus a more integrated approach, regardless of which healing system you're talking about, which is the difference between sort of this reactive place versus a more proactive, preventative place, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's that adage that you always hear that, physicians in India and China were paid to keep people well, not paid when someone came in sick. That's actually a problem. They're not paid when they're paid only to keep people well. And it's the exact opposite here in Western culture.
Right. And I think that's a problem for sure. But I also think that we can frame it as a opportunity, mm-hmm. and not to say that anyone's doing anything wrong. Or
of course.
I think there are probably people that have bad intentions, but the vast, vast majority have good intentions. But what we've done as a culture is that we have a paradigm of reactivity that I can do and live, and the doctor's just going to save me. And that's just how it is. Like, okay, if you get hit by a bus out there, don't come see a naturopathic doctor. It's not what we're here for.
Right.
But what the opportunity is the acknowledgement that we as a society and we as a healthcare industry, we as, lobby all the way to follow the money type of situation, is emphasizing this reactive model. And it's very good at it. And it's saved millions of lives. And it's not to be thrown out or say that it's toxic or dangerous. There are dangers to it, but it's to say that actually we can have both, and there doesn't have to be a choice. And I think the dichotomy that gets created is this thought that all of that side is toxic and dangerous and no good. And then the other side would say all of that is, quackery and not, and just mm-hmm. kind of all over the place, and there's no system to it. And I think we have more in common than we probably acknowledge.
Right.
And I think what a naturopathic doctor can be at its highest potential is a true bridge between those two worlds. And that is the initial draw of what brought me to it.
Yeah. And I think you're making a very, very important point, which is that the integration is so key. I always say I trained in Western medicine. I don't have anything against it. I think it's incredibly important.
I mean,
and it's not the whole story. that's where I think, where my perspective comes in of there are things that we don't know in Western medicine, that let's look to these other healing traditions, these other healing systems, these other healing modalities that, yeah, we may not have the data and the, random controlled double blind study and all of that kind of stuff, but we have thousands of years of evidence that it works.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, even to that, like, yes, there's certainly evidence to a lot of what we're talking about and what we're practicing, of course, but also the question and the paradigm and part of kind of the vision that people and the lens that people are looking through is that the questions that we ask and the ability to set up actual studies that would be reflective of more of a holistic and dynamic model are difficult to set up, because like to set so many variables, and this is an individual, that guy was one man with congestive heart failure, and how he got there was different than the next person that came in.
Right.
And, we can isolate as much as we can and test that, and we can see, great stuff. But I think a lot of the times the scoffing of certain modalities from a different approach or alternative approach, I could say, is just more difficult to demonstrate on large scales. There's funding issues too, and the scale that would be necessary to be credible is difficult. But beyond getting to that sort of level of things, I think it's more N of one, and like leaning into the idea that we 100,000 people cohort study, and those are amazing to see, especially the ones like the Framingham study that have been going on for decades. That's amazing. But, I think a lot of the times it's okay to dip your toe in the water that N of one, this person in front of you is the only thing that's relevant right now. We don't have to be beholden to following what somebody else did if it's going to work for this person, and that's enough, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I want to jump in because this is a great place to jump into something that we've talked a lot about, this idea of story as medicine, narrative medicine. But before we do, I just want to back up for a second and clarify a little more about naturopathy. And maybe, I know that there are some pillars within naturopathy. Again, I think it's really important for the listeners to really sort of tease out and understand. It's great to say that naturopathy is a real integration between the allopathic Western model and, the integration of all these other healing modalities. But let's get a little more granular. What does that actually mean? What are the pillars of how you maybe are looking at people when you're trying to help them?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, and we talked about this in the past too, is that the idea with naturopathic medicine versus going more of a conventional route from an education standpoint is that's the conventional side of things is kind of just what you see is what you get, and you follow the gold standard, and this is just how it goes. We hit this certain threshold. This is prescribed. This is ordered. This is referred. And that's true to the extent that we learned in naturopathic medical school, for sure. But I think we have 6 principles that we kind of root ourselves into, and each individual provider can kind of take the toolkit and the toolbox that best suits them and utilize it to the community that they serve. So for instance, like I learned all about physical medicine, massage, actual like chiropractic manipulations. And I just knew I wasn't going to utilize that in the same way that some of my colleagues do. Right. Mm-hmm. So I really like following the principles is like the first one is like do no harm. Hippocratic oath, everyone kind of takes that. The spin with a naturopathic sort of mentality is that we're trying to access what are the basics. And I know you talk about this all the time. What are the basics that we can do from like a therapeutic order where suppression of symptoms and surgery is at the very tip of the iceberg, to what are the foundational things that we can enter this situation with as little, potential for harm as possible. And that's like the rooting place. And then you kind of can kind of triage people from there of, okay, well, this person might need a higher level intervention, but this person, that's true, but they also have none of these foundational aspects in place. They're not eating well, they're not sleeping well, they're not relating well in all different types of ways. So that's kind of something that I root into for sure. The second is, it's called, they put all these principles in kind of Latin terms. So that one, this next one's called the vis meditrix naturae. And that's kind of what that means in Latin. I just butchered it, but like the intelligence of nature, or the ability of the body, given the right conditions, to heal itself. And, this is something that across, integrative medicine is acknowledged, but this is something that we're always rooting back into, is we're always asking the question, what are the obstacles of health for this particular person, whether that's physical, whether that's a lifestyle or behavioral thing, or whether that's mental, emotional. We're trying to understand this person and their story, and that's why we spend so much time with them, to see that when we open up impediments or contractions that aren't allowing them to flow as well, from maybe more non-material aspects of things, mentally, emotionally, that sort of thing, the body knows how to heal itself. And the same thing with food. If someone has a less than ideal diet, and then we clean that up, people tend to get better simply by food being a medicine there. So you have multiple doses a day for that to be possible. And why people get better and can reverse things like type 2 diabetes and other things along those lines is that you're just simply, there's harm happening to the body, and the body's compensating in the wisest way possible to keep you in balance or some semblance of homeostasis. And as soon as you kind of remove that, the body knows exactly what to do. It's like if you keep banging the same place on a coffee table, that wound just really won't heal. But as soon as you stop that, everything starts to go. You smoke cigarettes for 20 years. The moment you're done with every cigarette, your body immediately goes into a healing response and starts. It's, when you light up the next cigarette, you kind of start the clock back over. So it's really just this acknowledgement, or what are the things that are holding this person back from all different types of things. And then we use the modalities that we have to open this person up to a different level of healing, or to recover, or to, prevent progression from where they are. That's actually another principle, is prevention. So prevention in the strict sense of how we all think about it, when you talked about the old time physicians were, acknowledged more for their prevention and keeping people well than like actually responding to things. But that's all. It can also be seen as, okay, you're at this location. We don't like what's happening with our health for these reasons. But how can we mitigate that? How can we slow that down? How can we hopefully reverse that and prevent a more serious situation? Because I think from the conventional standpoint, there is this march sometimes of pathology where we're putting Band-Aids on things, which is appropriate, keeps people alive, keeps people comfortable. But if there's clear things that are causing that to happen, that's kind of what we're looking at as far as the preventative piece. So it kind of all comes together too.
Right. So those two it's interesting. Well, actually, the first three you talked about do no harm. The second is the body can heal itself naturally. And the third is this prevention, right? They all go hand in hand, because if there's the assumption that the body can heal itself, right, then we as physicians, as health professionals, our role is to guide someone and help them with prevention, to remove the obstacles to the body doing that, right? That's really what I'm hearing.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I want to acknowledge, and we'll probably talk about this later, but how I see it at least is that we are just facilitators, and we aren't, like, we call ourselves healers, and people call us healers, but it's always the body. It's always the person, and it's always a decision that they're making to change and challenge the status quo. And they do it. We don't, some people, there's plenty of gurus out there that will tell you that they're healing people. I don't agree with that. And that's just like an acknowledgement of that side of things. Yeah. And, with that, the latter three principles kind of go together too, with how what you kind of root into with a naturopathic doctor is that you're trying to treat the whole person. And with that, you're treating the cause. And that kind of sounds obvious. Like, yeah, of course you're trying to treat the cause and you're trying to treat the whole person, but that's not often acknowledged. It's kind of goes along with these two, is like, what are the impediments that are leading to this person as a whole person to not be seen or heard or understood in a way that they have maybe in the past. And a lot of that, sometimes I think we get rooted so into the physical modalities. So, I'm the nutrition director. I'm also the director of naturopathic medicine, and a lot of it, and we've talked about this, is like, oh, it's all BIN does is nutrition, and that's like the physical aspect.
Right.
And there's a lot of issues. Like, yeah, we can work on the diet, and that's obviously a huge part of things. But there's also a lot of people that have disordered eating and relationships with food and with their body. And treating the whole person is not just understanding and giving them more information, or kind of just a diet plan that's going to be like a quick fix or 30 days or something fad that they've already done before. To understand them as a whole person and to treat the cause is to try to unpack for them, if they're willing to go there, of course, the belief structures and what they believe to be true, what they're holding, what has kept them safe or unsafe in the past as it relates to their story around food and around their body. And that level of things tends to shift people, because we have these 4 planes that maybe you've talked about on the podcast before, where it's like the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, the soul, spiritual, whatever you want to call it. And real change, real cause, real approaches that kind of can shift somebody from a person they were to a whole different type of person, i.e. transformation, is really when you're able to tap into these latter 3 levels. Because if it's just like, here's another meal plan, here's a boatload of supplements, here's, this other thing, that might move the needle, but it might not be something that's actually treating a cause of anything, right? Mm-hmm. And with that, the final principle is another Latin docere, or doctor as teacher. So this is all about education. Sometimes it is just somebody doesn't understand, I guess starting my day off that way isn't the best way, or, going to bed at 1 a.m. every night isn't serving me, or having 8 cups of coffee isn't, like, and like just kind of educating and being the teacher around that. And not to say that all doctors don't try to teach their patients what's going on, but again, going back to the abbreviated appointments in a lot of medical settings, it's not possible. It's not possible to teach people a different way of living when that time simply isn't available. So a big part of being a naturopathic doctor and what we learn is explaining things to people with enough time and enough compassion, and trying to find analogies that are relevant to them. Right. And you only find analogies that are relevant to somebody by getting to know them, which is like what I love to do.
Right. That was a beautiful description of the pillars of naturopathic medicine, which also dovetails right into this idea of story, right? Of having that time to really get to know someone. So let's talk about that, because I know that is something that you're extremely gifted at. And I know that's also something that's really sort of your interest in how you approach your patients. So let's talk about that approach, the story, the narrative, and the medicine that comes from that.
Right. So, I think what I have found, especially people coming to me with food concerns, with body concerns, I want to lose weight, I want to do these things, is that a lot of approaches have been, a lot of approaches in nutrition are contradictory, they're confusing, they are all saying all different types of things. People don't know what to understand. And I think it's evidence that we've given away a lot of power to outside influences, and not kind of understanding where we are coming from. So kind of what I have found really interesting and what I love to do is to try, if someone's willing to go there, again, that's always the prerequisite, of trying to understand the person as a whole and how their way of being, if it's challenging for them, I'm assuming if they're sitting with me, there's something challenging going on that has developed. How would that be possible? How would anything is, the only way anything is possible is by prior causes, and by the lens that you're looking through via perspectives and experiences that you've had across your life. Because let's say someone wants to lose weight, or they have a certain way of eating that they know isn't healthy. And what I've found is that people do not need, most of the time, do not need more information. Right. Like I said, some people do, like, I shouldn't start my day that way. Oh, that's interesting. I shouldn't do this. That's interesting. I didn't ever think about that. But most people don't need more information in order to change. Most people don't need more willpower to change their behaviors. They've already tried that. They've gotten, they clicked the link for the latest diet fad and they've been shamed into saying you're not trying hard enough. Mm-hmm. But what I find is that in lieu of information and willpower, if we can start to have a sensitivity to where someone's coming from and their story and their narrative about themselves, what were their influences, what was their childhood like, what was food like then, what have you thought about your body, what are like huge cornerstone moments of your life. When you start to understand that, you can open up a door of compassion and understanding and forgiveness and an awareness that was previously just felt like you were just kind of at the whim of everything, and that you needed to grasp for straws of somebody outside of you to save you. And this goes back to the idea that doctors are seen as healers, and you can just kind of live your life and someone will always be there to save you. And I think what I try to turn people back into is that they are their own healer, and it's via their story and sometimes how people have treated themselves or, not cared for themselves or not had compassion for themselves is really just some sort of limiting belief or narrative that doesn't necessarily have to be true. And I think when people see that and they can release it and just see it as clearly as possible, and we go through a lot of different things to go about that there can be a huge ease. And what I tell people all the time is that my biggest goal is that you have a freedom with food in your body that just feels effortless. That's what I want. And if you can come to terms with this internal narrative, that's possible. And I'll wrap this up by saying the dichotomy there is you look at diet culture, you look at just kind of how things are portrayed in popular culture, and especially towards women. Obviously, that's we have to acknowledge that that's definitely who the target is. Social media, all these things, it's pulling people away from their inner sense of authority and knowing themselves, like even basic cues, interoception of kind of having a sense of themselves, hunger, fullness cues, what works for them, what doesn't. They've divorced and dissociated so far from their body and their experience that they've pawned it off to an outer authority, to all these, the ads saying, oh, this year's finally your year, and, shame on you, this is kind of how things go. And don't worry, we'll send everything to you in the mail and you don't have to think about a thing, and just make a few shakes a day and you're going to lose all that weight and, feel better about yourself, or they come to me and they want me to help them count calories, or they want to weigh themselves every day. And I'm really, obviously, I think you can tell them definitely against that. And it creates way more anxiety and challenge than it helps. And really what you're trying to develop there is acknowledging the outer authority and the reliance on that, saying somebody else needs to tell me what to eat, someone needs to tell me exact quantity, tell me how to portion control, tell me how to do all these things. Whereas you, by paying attention and having awareness, already have all the tools you need to do exactly what you're asking somebody else to do. And when people realize that, there's like a click of, oh, actually, yes, I can do all of that. And it's very empowering. And then you have an agency, and then you start to let go of the story of what a body needs to be and what health is and how it's redefined in a way that is less about a number on the scale or the shape in the mirror, and more about how is health providing you with a resource to live a life as meaningfully as you can. That's how I see health. It's like it's not about what you look like. It's not about how big you are. It's not about how skinny you are, because both sides, you can see happy people, you can see miserable people. It doesn't matter. It's about what is the state of your caring for yourself and your body that allows you to live a life most meaningfully with as much purpose as you possibly can. If you can't get up in the morning, or you're in such a bad mood because your blood sugar's all over the place and you're yelling at people and you're in traffic and you're miserable and you're yelling at your husband, you're yelling at your kids, and you can't focus at work and you hate your job, you are not living life with the meaning that I guarantee that you would want. I would hope that you want. Right. So redefining that can be really powerful for people. But again, just saying it to them with information, not enough. Just saying change that with willpower, not enough. You have to understand them as a person.
Right. Thank you for that, because I think that it's such an important point, because what's coming up for me is this idea of what you were saying, that, there's this understanding that it's not just the physical body. It's
Yeah.
all these layers, right? It's the
Yeah.
physical, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, the energetic body, however you want to define them, right?
Yeah.
And I think when you come with that framework as a health professional, as a
Yeah.
facilitator, as a guide, as a teacher to people, what you're doing is you're looking at them and you're hearing them and seeing them as all of those things. You're not
Exactly.
just looking at them as a physical body that we learn in the allopathic model, right?
Right.
Which is very much about, okay, so what's the symptom? What's going on? What's wrong? Okay, let me diagnose it. Let me prescribe. Let me fix
Exactly.
it.
Yes.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
On a physical level, we're going deeper. I mean, and even psychiatrists, yes, they go to the mind, but it's only now that psychiatry is really changing into this, nutritional psychiatry, looking at culinary medicine, looking at plant medicine, and all these other things, which is actually starting to look at it in this more holistic way.
Right.
But I think that's what you're getting at, is that through the story, through that narrative,
Mm-hmm.
the medicine is being able to see all aspects of a human being,
Right.
right? All
It's
of those
beautiful.
different bodies, right? Not because what you're talking about is you actually being able to spend the time with a patient and to get beyond the physical of what are you eating, how many calories in and out, all that nonsense, right?
Right.
And you're getting to the other levels,
Right.
because what ends up happening is we only fix one level, which how can you
Right.
sustain
And
that?
that's part of treating the cause, because often the cause isn't on the physical level. And I think the acknowledgement there is that anyone, a naturopathic doctor, other integrative medicine, I'm sure people in your audience can recognize that there are naturopathic doctors that don't, and integrative, that don't uphold that sort of principle and see it in that way. And it doesn't have to be like this woo out there type of thing. Are emotions not real? Is like our thoughts not real? It's just like getting into that. And what a lot of people do, a lot of providers do, is they focus so hard on the physical, and they put people on 20 supplements because they're trying to change the physical. They do a trillion stool tests and every test under the book. And what are we looking for? We're looking for something wrong on the physical. So when something's like, oh, okay, we can make some tweaks here, or the physician's worst nightmare, everything's normal, then what do you say? Right? Or
Right.
like, no, they're not responding to the protocol you put them on. Then what? Right? And so now a naturopathic doctor or an integrative provider is in a very similar situation to
Yes.
the PCP that's saying, hey, I have joint pain. What can you do about it? I'm really done taking steroids and anti-inflammatories. I don't know. So, it's not to say that your thoughts are giving you rheumatoid arthritis necessarily, but it's saying that trying to understand the whole person beyond the physical is what we're talking about here, because you can't treat the whole person if you're just relying on the physical aspects over a long period of time. And there's some people that you need to start with the physical, and you almost need to, you need a proof of concept type of situation.
Yes.
And that's fine. And you slowly but that's why you spend time and you come back with people if it feels like it's going to be appropriate and it's going to be resonant. And then what do you know, by the third time, we haven't even talked about food for a couple of weeks now, right?
Right.
It's because that's not what it's about usually. In some respects, it's deeper than that. And when you access that, you can open somebody up to a different level of health. Yeah.
Right. It's almost like, the energetic body, these other bodies are actually the blueprint. I always say this, the energetic body is the blueprint for the physical body. And so that's why when you actually start that way, when you start looking at the energetic body, things shift a lot faster. When you go the opposite way, it'll happen, but it's going to take a lot more willpower, as you said, and a lot more time. It's almost like a time warp that happens in the sense of like things speed up when you go the energetic route. And if you have both going on.
Yeah. And wow. Yeah.
Wow. Right.
Yeah, because it's just to be clear for everybody listening, because I know a lot of people are doing stool tests and all these things. Not to say I'm against it, and I haven't, but I'm saying you can absolutely help people with that route.
For sure.
But my assertion and my prediction is that you're not going to help everybody. And there's going to be a lot of people that is confusing, or, okay, now what? What's the exit strategy here? Am I just on these antifungals forever? Right? It's like, what are we thinking about here?
Right.
How I have these chronic digestive issues, but you've never asked about stress in my life, and you've never asked about, how I felt stress in my stomach since I was a little kid. What's that all about? Like, you're just throwing supplements and nothing's shifting because there's something else happening here, right? So
exactly.
I would just want to acknowledge that people can operate on the physical plane and get excellent results because it's better than shoulder shrug, but
for sure.
There's more that I like to do, at least.
Yeah, there's more. And again, this is not to say, like, what we've been saying throughout this conversation. And I always say there's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. In Ayurveda, it's very clear. There is no such thing as good or bad. It's all what is supporting your health and what is weakening your health, right? It's
N of one. It's
N of one,
right?
Exactly.
Because if it's not N of one, it's a protocol, and if the protocol doesn't work, it's the patient's fault, or it's maybe they weren't compliant enough. Where it's like, hey, maybe we should just acknowledge that we needed a different combination of approaches here, right?
Right. Yeah. I know it's beautiful. And I think it's such a good point again, and a good reminder that there is so much more into not feel bad if you're trying a protocol as a patient, as somebody who comes to one of us and something isn't working. It's not your fault. It's not that, the medication's not going to work, or the procedure's not going to work, or anything like that. It's that there's some other things going on too, that once you sort of like unlock that lock and you put that key in, things can change really quickly. It's a combination and integration, right?
Yeah.
So question that I would have for you is that, let's say somebody is really interested in naturopathy and a naturopathic approach. Where do they start?
Well, it depends on where you are. There's naturopaths all over the country, in Canada, all over the world too. My recommendation on a basic level is just to look at the AAMC, which is like the American Association for AMNC, the Naturopathic Association, and just find a provider local to you and just kind of explore, and kind of from this discussion today, use it maybe as like an educational piece to be like, hey, like, how can I kind of triage this person? There's a lot of NDs. They're more concentrated, obviously, where there's schools kind of out west and, throughout the country. But I think the basic approach is just kind of exploring this medicine, exploring each provider. Like I said, just because I say these things doesn't mean that every provider is uniform. And I think that's a strength, not a weakness in naturopathic medicine, that each of us can take what we learned and how we understand things, and we can all help people in incredible ways through the lens that we choose to practice. And I think that provides freedom. And what I initially wanted when I made the decision to go to naturopathic medical school is that I did not see that freedom in the conventional way, right? I think 15 years in, I could have maybe pivoted, but I would have, went through what the hospital wanted me to do, what the reimbursement of insurance wanted me to do, and whatever, that's fine for some people, but that's kind of for me. So to answer your question, it's going to vary from person to person. We're all rooted into these 6 principles, but just kind of whatever someone's dealing with or they want to explore, they can, find that on a case by case basis.
Okay. Yeah. And we'll make sure we link the association that you mentioned in the show notes for people. Last question for you. So if you had 3 tips to give people, as they're on their health journeys, and I know this is a very broad question because everyone's dealing with different things, but what would be 3 tips that you would say generally to somebody who's just trying to feel better?
I would look at food first, just as a very basic high level thing. And I would have them just be mindful of what they're consuming. Are they consuming enough? What kind of does their day look like? Are they giving enough attention to food? Are they giving enough attention to caring for themselves in that way? To prepare meals, to have that ready for them? What sort of things are they putting into their body, and how can that contribute to problems that they might be having? Along with that would be, are you getting enough water? Are you going to the bathroom every day? If you're not eating well, drinking well, and eliminating well, that's like that is just basic stuff. With that too is sleep. If sleep is off, you need help with sleep from somebody, whether that's a naturopathic doctor or otherwise. I don't know. I think that might be 4 at this point. But,
Okay.
and I also just think having a willingness, especially someone that's going through a chronic illness or a relationship with food in their body that they're kind of done with kind of chasing the dragon, so to speak, is to start to get curious and compassionate with themselves. And I think curiosity is the most important aspect to getting to these latter 3 levels that we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, there's a difference between wanting peace and wanting to be right. And you can be right the rest of your life and you never have to change and you never have to question anything. And that's fine, but if you want to just challenge the status quo, I guess the biggest overarching thing is just start getting curious about your life, start finding ways to live with more awareness, because what you pay attention to and what you're aware of, you can't hurt yourself from that place, right? If you're mindlessly eating junk food all day and soda and you're not thinking about it and you're not making any sort of connections, that's why it's affecting you in the way that it might be, right? So compassion, curiosity, awareness, it's broad topics, but it's that's it. That's it.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's, again, we overcomplicate things in Western culture. And it really does come back to those simple, basic things, right? Yeah. The awareness is the key. I always say awareness is the first step with anything, right?
I'm skipping breakfast every day because I'm, quote, intermittent fasting, because I saw it at the newsstand at Whole Foods. And, but also I'm just casually, I'm also drinking 8 cups of coffee a day and I feel terrible and I need to take a nap in the afternoon. It's like, if you kind of release that and just kind of paid attention to how's that approach and pattern of eating working for you, you might say, hey, maybe a little simple breakfast might be a good idea, and just paying attention to that and see what shifts. And I would imagine that things start to feel better. Like just basic, like that's just basic, but you get that feedback by paying attention. If you're just kind of too stressed out to allocate any sort of prioritization towards yourself, you're going to just miss a lot, right? Yes. That's obviously.
Yeah. It's that caring for yourself. And, you've said it a few times, and I think it's a really beautiful way to think about it is, health is ultimately, how are you caring for yourself? How are you taking care of you and all parts of you, all levels, all layers of your emotional, physical, spiritual, mental, energetic body? Yeah. Like, what are you doing for all of those different levels? And really getting curious, like you said,
Yeah. Curiosity.
Yeah. And so this feels like a really good place for us to sort of end our time talking, because we could talk for hours as we have many times and have both been late for patients or like running to the next thing while we're at BIÂN. If I offer up the phrase to catalyze healing, what comes up for you?
Awareness. Yeah, being there. Being there, being present. I mean, that goes along with curiosity too, but if it's one word, it always comes back to awareness, self-awareness, awareness of what you're doing, how you're caring for yourself or not. You cannot change anything if you don't have an awareness of there being an issue or where it's coming from. So that is the absolute prerequisite, is awareness.
I couldn't agree with you more. Ben, thank you so much for this conversation. I love talking to you. I could talk to you for hours, and this was really fun.
Had a great time. Thank you so much.
Thanks again for listening to The Healing Catalyst. If you love what you heard, please hit follow and pass it along to a friend. And if you're feeling really inspired, please rate and review so that others can find this podcast more easily. To learn more, head to AvantiKumarSingh.com. And to connect with me directly, find me on Instagram at AvantiKumarSingh. I'll be back next week and hope that you will be too. Until then, remember, with the right catalyst, you have the power to activate your own healing, because healing starts within.